It had been nearly a decade since Mark Ellison retired from the U.S. Army. After 20 years of service, multiple tours overseas, and enough stories to fill a library, all he wanted was peace. He bought a modest home in a quiet suburban community. Maple trees lined the sidewalks, kids rode bikes in the cul-de-sacs, and neighbors waved as they mowed their lawns. It was exactly the calm he'd been looking for. His pride and joy sat in the driveway, a restored 1972 Ford F-250, painted in matte green with black accents. The truck wasn't flashy, but it was clean, polished, and bore a veteran license plate, a small symbol of a lifetime of service. Every Saturday morning, Mark could be found outside with a rag and polish, humming to himself as he wiped down the fenders. But that tranquility didn't last long. The Homeowners Association, a group of overzealous neighbors who treated neighborhood bylaws like constitutional amendments, had recently hired a new security officer. At least, that's what he called himself. His name was Dale Cooper, a bulky man in his mid-40s who strutted around like he owned the place. He wore a dark blue shirt with HOA security stitched above the breast pocket, a badge-shaped patch on his sleeve, and a shiny belt buckle that looked suspiciously like it came from a Halloween store. The first time Mark met Dale, it was over a note taped to his truck windshield. Notice of violation, unauthorized vehicle, non-conforming color, and military markings. Must be removed within 48 hours or subject to HOA enforcement action. Mark frowned, looking around. He'd read the HOA's handbook cover to cover before buying his home. Nothing prohibited military-style vehicles, and the truck wasn't even parked on the street. He peeled off the notice, folded it carefully, and decided to pay a visit to the HOA office the next day. The next morning, he walked in wearing jeans and a faded army t-shirt. The HOA president, Linda Sharp, looked up from her computer and offered a tight smile. "Mr. Ellison, I assume this is about the notice?" she asked, as if she'd been expecting him. "That's right," Mark said calmly. "My vehicle is fully registered, parked in my own driveway, and meets every requirement in the bylaws. I just wanted to clarify that before someone oversteps." Linda shifted uncomfortably, her red glasses sliding down her nose. "We've had complaints from neighbors saying it looks militarized. It might intimidate some residents." Mark's lips twitched into a thin smile. "Intimidating? It's a pickup truck, not a tank." That was when Dale appeared from the back office, arms crossed and chin lifted. "Rules are rules, buddy. HOA doesn't want war machines parked on lawns." Mark turned slowly. "First off, it's Mr. Ellison. Second, that's a veteran vehicle, protected by state law. And third, I don't recall you having any legal authority to enforce anything." Dale stepped closer. "I'm HOA security. You do well to show a little respect." The silence between them stretched tight as wire. Mark held his gaze without blinking, his years in uniform showing through in that calm, measured stare. Finally, Linda cleared her throat and awkwardly waved her hand. "Gentlemen, please. Let's keep this civil." Mark didn't argue further. He thanked her for her time, turned on his heel, and walked out. But as he did, he caught sight of Dale whispering something under his breath. Over the next week, small things began to happen. A citation for oil leaks appeared on his porch, though the driveway was spotless. A letter accused him of violating community aesthetics. Then, 2 nights in a row, Mark caught someone with a flashlight outside, snapping photos of his truck. He reported it to the HOA, but they claimed ignorance. "We'll look into it," Linda said, though her tone suggested she wouldn't. Mark started documenting everything, each letter, each violation notice, each photo of the mysterious flashlight outside. His military instincts kicked in: observe, record, prepare. Something about this HOA cop didn't sit right. His uniform had no proper insignia, his vehicle bore no official markings, and yet he carried himself like a man drunk on authority. One evening, as Mark was locking up his garage, Dale pulled up in his white pickup. It had flashing amber lights on the top and the words "Community Enforcement Unit" stenciled along the door in blocky letters. "You've been warned enough," Dale said through his window. "That vehicle is going to be removed." You can either move it yourself or deal with the consequences. Mark leaned on the fence, utterly unshaken. You touch that truck and you'll be explaining it to real law enforcement. Dale smirked. Oh, I'll be sure to let them know. We work together. Mark chuckled softly, shaking his head. Son, you don't even know what real authority looks like. As Dale drove off, tires squealing, Mark's gut told him this wasn't over. Men like that didn't back down, they escalated. Later that night, Mark pulled out his old GoPro and set it up near the window overlooking the driveway. Just in case. He knew something was coming. And he was right. Because in just a few days, that same fake cop would return, not with a citation but with a bulldozer. And when he did, he'd have no idea whose vehicle he was about to destroy. The morning it happened started out deceptively peaceful. A thin layer of fog rolled through the neighborhood, and the sun had just begun to peek through the trees when Mark brewed his first pot of coffee. He was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through the newspaper, when a strange low rumble began to echo through the street. It wasn't a truck. It wasn't construction. It was heavier, louder. His cup froze halfway to his lips. Then came a metallic clank, then another. He rose, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain, and his stomach dropped. A bulldozer, bright yellow and massive, was parked in front of his driveway. Its engine roared as black exhaust puffed into the crisp morning air. And standing beside it, arms crossed like he was running a police operation, was Dale Cooper, the self-proclaimed HOA cop. Mark's mind snapped into focus. No, he muttered, rushing toward the front door. By the time he stepped outside, the sound of hydraulic pressure filled the air. Dale was yelling over the noise, waving a clipboard like a badge. This is HOA enforcement action. Vehicle to be removed immediately. What the hell do you think you're doing? Mark shouted, striding down the driveway. Dale didn't flinch. You were warned, Ellison. Non-compliant vehicle. Multiple notices ignored. I've got authorization from the HOA to have it demolished. Demolished? Mark repeated, disbelief in his voice. That's private property. You have no legal right to touch it. Dale waved his hand toward the bulldozer operator, a nervous-looking man wearing an orange vest and hard hat. Take it out, Dale barked. Get rid of the eyesore. The operator hesitated. You sure, man? This looks like somebody's. Do it. Dale snapped. The bulldozer's blade lurched forward. Metal screeched as it scraped against the asphalt, heading straight for the truck. Stop. Mark roared, sprinting forward. He stopped short just a few feet from the blade, his voice cutting through the mechanical noise. That's my vehicle. You touch it, you're committing a felony. But the operator, under pressure and confused, followed Dale's order. The steel blade slammed into the front end of Mark's truck. The sound of crunching metal was deafening. The front bumper bent, headlights shattered, and the hood caved in like a crushed soda can. Neighbors began pouring out of their houses. Phones were out, recording. Someone shouted, "Is this real? Are they allowed to do that?" Mark stood frozen, jaw clenched, fists trembling at his sides. Years of discipline were the only thing keeping him from doing something he'd regret. He turned slowly toward Dale, his voice low and steady. You just destroyed federal protected property, you idiot. Dale blinked, smirking. Federal? Please. It's just a junker with stickers. Mark pointed to the front of the truck, where the military veteran license plate was now half buried under the twisted hood. That's not a sticker. That plate is government issued. You just ordered the destruction of a veteran's vehicle, and that's going to be the biggest mistake of your life. The bulldozer operator shut down the engine. The street fell silent except for the sound of glass crackling underfoot. Dale's confidence wavered for the first time. You should have moved it when I told you to. You knew this was coming. Mark didn't respond. He simply turned, walked calmly back toward his porch, and pulled out his phone. Who are you calling? Dale barked. The real police, Mark said, dialing. Not whatever act you're playing. Within minutes, distant sirens began to echo down the street. Neighbors whispered, a few even stepping forward to give statements. One woman said she had video from the start, She'd caught everything from the first order Dale gave. When the patrol cars arrived, the scene was chaos. Officers climbed out, scanning the wreckage. One of them, a young sergeant, took one look at the destroyed truck and then at the bulldozer. What in the world happened here? Before Mark could speak, Dale stepped forward, puffing out his chest. Officer, I'm with the HOA Security Division. We had to enforce compliance. This vehicle was violating community regulations. The sergeant frowned. HOA Security Division? You got identification? Of course, Dale said confidently, pulling out a laminated badge. It looked official from a distance until the officer held it closer. This isn't a government-issued ID, the sergeant said flatly. This is the custom print. Mark crossed his arms, standing behind him. Told you he was fake. Dale's voice cracked slightly. No, I'm authorized. The board approved this action. The officer looked at Mark. Sir, this your vehicle? Mark nodded. Was my vehicle. Until this man ordered a bulldozer to crush it. And before he did, I told him exactly what that license plate meant. The sergeant leaned down, brushing off debris from the front bumper. The veteran plate, bent and dusty, gleamed faintly in the morning sun. He stood up slowly, turning to Dale with narrowed eyes. You do realize this is a veteran plate, right? You just vandalized protected property and impersonated law enforcement to do it. Dale's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His face drained of color. Behind them, neighbors murmured, cameras still recording. The bulldozer operator took a step back, hands raised. Hey, I didn't know. He said it was an authorized job. I was just hired for the morning. Sir, the sergeant said, shut the machine off and stay right there. We'll need your statement. Mark watched as another officer cuffed Dale's hands behind his back. For the first time, the self-proclaimed HOA cop looked small, sweat glistening on his forehead, his fake badge dangling loosely on his chest. You made a huge mistake today, Mark said quietly. And you're about to learn what real authority looks like. As the officers escorted Dale toward the patrol car, Mark stood in front of what was left of his truck. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a memory of years of service, of brothers lost and sacrifices made. Watching it destroyed under the command of a fraud burned deeper than any insult could. But he wasn't angry anymore, just resolute. He had all the evidence he needed. The video, the witnesses, and the fake cop caught red-handed. And soon enough, this entire HOA and its self-appointed enforcer would learn that you can't bulldoze a soldier's pride. The police presence in the neighborhood grew quickly. Within 20 minutes, 2 more patrol cars and a supervisor's SUV arrived on the scene. Yellow caution tape stretched across the end of Mark's driveway, fluttering in the wind. The once quiet street now buzzed with murmured conversations, flashing lights, and neighbors whispering over fences. Mark stood a few feet from his crushed truck, arms folded, face unreadable. Every dent, every shattered piece of glass reflected not just damage, but disrespect. He'd faced worse in combat zones, but this was a violation of home, of peace, and of dignity. Dale sat on the curb, still trying to talk his way out of it. His fake uniform shirt was rumpled, and his badge, a cheap-looking metal shield with the words Community Enforcement Division etched in bold, gleamed in the sunlight. I told you, he was saying to one of the officers, I was authorized by the HOA. They wanted that truck gone. I was just following orders. I didn't mean to cause any harm. The officer didn't look convinced. Mr. Cooper, do you understand impersonating law enforcement is a criminal offense? That badge alone could get you in serious trouble. It's not impersonating, Dale snapped. I'm not pretending to be police. I'm community enforcement, it's different. Mark couldn't help but let out a low chuckle. You sure didn't sound different when you were shouting orders at a bulldozer, officer. Dale's head shot up, eyes narrowing. You think you're so high and mighty because of that plate? Mark didn't respond. He didn't need to. The veteran license plate, now twisted and dented, had drawn the attention of the supervising sergeant, a tall, weathered man named Sergeant Ramirez. Ramirez had served in the Marines, and when he saw the remnants of that plate, his entire demeanor changed. He approached Mark with respect in his voice. Sir, I see that's a military veteran plate. You active or retired? Retired, Mark replied simply. Army. 20 years. Ramirez nodded once, understanding everything that didn't need to be said. And this man ordered a civilian bulldozer to crush your property. Correct, claimed HOA authority. I told him multiple times to stop. He ignored me. You've got neighbors with video, and my own camera's got the whole thing. The sergeant turned toward Dale, his tone shifting from calm to cold steel. You didn't just destroy private property, Cooper. That's federal property identification on that plate. You've crossed into criminal territory, vandalism, impersonation, destruction of protected property, trespassing, you name it. Dale's confidence crumbled. Look, I didn't know it was. Ramirez cut him off. Didn't know? You don't touch anyone's property without legal authority. And you sure don't order heavy machinery on a civilian street. The bulldozer operator, who'd been leaning against his machine, stepped forward nervously. Officer, I didn't mean any harm. He said he had a removal order signed by the HOA president. I was just hired for the morning. Mark turned his attention toward him. You'll want to keep that paperwork, son. It's your best defense. He lied to you just like he lied to everyone else. Ramirez motioned to another officer. Bag that badge. Get his fake ID too. When the officer approached Dale, he pulled a wallet from his pocket, revealing a laminated card with the HOA logo and the words, Security Enforcement Officer, Dale Cooper. It looked almost convincing until you noticed the misspelled word. Authorized. Mark couldn't help but shake his head. Real professional work you've got there. Dale tried one last desperate attempt at justification. You don't understand. The HOA gave me power to enforce compliance. People around here don't follow the rules. I was just keeping order. Ramirez took a slow breath, his patience running thin. You're not law enforcement. You don't have authority. The HOA can send letters, fines, even lawyers, but not bulldozers. You crossed every line possible today. At that, Dale's bravado finally cracked. He looked down, shoulders sagging. His voice came out small. I thought I was doing the right thing. Mark stepped closer, his voice quiet but cutting. You thought wrong. And you thought you could intimidate people. Maybe that works on folks who don't know better. But you picked the wrong man's driveway. The sergeant ordered Dale to stand. Cuffs clicked around his wrists. A crowd of neighbors clapped, not loudly, but with relief. Some even shouted things like, about time, and he's been harassing us for months. Linda Sharp, the HOA president, had appeared by then, standing awkwardly behind the police line in her pressed blouse and pearls. Her face was pale. When she caught Mark's eye, she tried to speak. Mr. Ellison, I didn't approve this. He acted on his own. Mark didn't answer right away. So, you didn't sign the order? No, of course not, she said quickly. We just wanted him to issue citations, not this. Ramirez turned toward her. Ma'am, we'll need to speak with you down at the station. If your organization authorized this man, even verbally, it's a civil and possibly criminal liability. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Mark sighed, looking around at the mess. His truck's frame was warped, glass scattered across the driveway like ice shards. But what stood out most was the silence, the humbling kind that follows when lies collapse under truth. He crouched, brushing his fingers along the broken edge of the license plate. It was bent, but not destroyed. The word veteran was still visible, bold and proud, even through the dirt and scratches. Standing again, Mark looked at Dale, who was now being led toward the patrol car. You see that plate? He said, voice low. That means sacrifice, discipline, and honor, things you can't fake with a badge from eBay. Dale said nothing. He just stared at the ground as the door shut behind him. As the police began their reports and the crowd slowly dispersed, Mark felt the weight of it all settle on his shoulders. He'd dealt with aggression before, but not this kind, not the kind fueled by arrogance and fake power. Yet, even as he stood among the wreckage, he knew justice was already in motion. He didn't need revenge. He just needed accountability. And judging by the look on the real officers' faces, it was coming swiftly. The morning after the incident, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Word spread faster than wildfire. The HOA cop had been arrested, and a veteran's truck had been destroyed in broad daylight. By noon, clips from the neighbors' videos had already made their way onto social media. The headline practically wrote itself. Fake HOA officer orders Bulldozer to crush veteran's truck, faces criminal charges. For the first time in months, Mark's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, veteran organizations, and even a few lawyers wanted to hear his side. But Mark wasn't after fame. He just wanted accountability. By the afternoon, Sergeant Ramirez called with an update. "We've confirmed everything," he said. Dale Cooper was never licensed for any kind of security work. The badge, the ID, even the contract he waved around, all fake. He's being charged with impersonating an officer, destruction of property, trespassing, and intimidation. Mark nodded slowly. And the HOA? The board's in deep trouble too. He listed them as authorizers on his forms, which puts them under investigation. "You'll probably get a call from our legal department for your statement." "Copy that," Mark said, his voice calm as ever. When the police hung up, he exhaled deeply. For the first time since moving into that community, the air felt lighter, not because the chaos was over, but because justice had finally started to move. That evening, Mark stood in his driveway, surveying the damage one last time before the tow truck arrived to take the wrecked F-250 to a restoration shop. The hood was crumpled, the bumper twisted, and the front axle bent beyond repair. Yet that veteran plate still clung stubbornly to the frame, a little bent but defiantly visible. Neighbors came by to offer support. The same people who once stayed silent under HOA pressure now spoke up, emboldened by what they'd witnessed. "Mark, I saw everything," said Tom, the man from across the street. "I've already sent my video to the police. That guy's been bullying folks for months. You just finally stood up to him." Mark gave a modest nod. "It's not about standing up to him. It's about standing up for what's right. Nobody should have to deal with a wannabe cop on a power trip." By nightfall, his story was everywhere. Local news vans lined the street, though Mark politely declined interviews. He didn't need cameras. The truth was already loud enough. A week later, the HOA held an emergency community meeting. Mark attended, sitting quietly in the back, while the remaining board members faced a sea of angry homeowners. The air was thick with frustration. Linda Sharp, looking weary and much less confident than before, stepped up to the microphone. "First, on behalf of the HOA, we deeply apologize to Mr. Ellison for what occurred," she began. "The actions taken by Mr. Cooper were unauthorized, illegal, and do not reflect our values." A man from the audience shouted, "Then why was he wearing an HOA uniform?" Another woman added, "And why did we see him patrolling every night for months?" "You knew exactly what he was doing." The crowd murmured in agreement. Linda's voice trembled. We made a mistake trusting him." Effective immediately, the board has voted to terminate all private enforcement roles and hire a legitimate management company to handle future compliance. Mark raised a hand. When the room quieted, he stood and spoke evenly. "I appreciate the apology, but apologies don't rebuild what's broken. My truck was more than metal. It was 20 years of service, of memories. That man didn't just crush property. He crushed respect." A hush fell over the room. Linda swallowed hard, nodding. "You're right, Mr. Ellison. We'll cover every cent of the damages and cooperate fully with authorities." "That's a start," Mark said before sitting down again. 3 months later, justice arrived in full. Dale Cooper pled guilty to all charges. The court sentenced him to 3 years in prison with restitution payments and mandatory community service upon release. The HOA faced heavy fines for negligence and failure to verify credentials before granting authority. Mark received compensation that covered not only the full repair of his truck, but also emotional damages. A local veterans organization stepped in, offering to rebuild the F-250 free of charge. Volunteers, some of them fellow vets, spent weekends sanding, repainting, and reassembling the beloved vehicle. When it was finally finished, the truck looked even better than before, deep forest green with a chrome bumper and a new custom plate that read "Stand Tall." On the day it was delivered back to his driveway, dozens of neighbors gathered around. Some waved small American flags, others just smiled, grateful that justice had been served. Sergeant Ramirez even stopped by, handing Mark a small plaque that read, "For courage under civil fire." Presented to Ret. Sergeant Mark Ellison for standing firm against false authority. Mark shook his hand firmly. "Didn't feel like courage," he said. "Just felt like doing the right thing." Ramirez smiled. "That's what courage usually feels like." That night, Mark sat on his porch as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. The newly restored truck gleamed in the driveway, its polished metal catching the amber glow of sunset. The air was still, peaceful again, the way it had been before all the chaos. He took a long sip of coffee and allowed himself a quiet smile. "They thought they could bulldoze over a veteran," he murmured. "Turns out, I've stood through worse." The faint hum of crickets filled the air, and for the first time in a long while, Mark felt truly at home again, not just in his house, but in the community that had finally found its voice. Because when false power rises, it only takes one steady man, one real defender, to bring it crashing down. And that's exactly what he'd done.